We now turn to our second speaker. I'm going to introduce Martin to you, not as the big figure he is in Enfield Archaeological Society and the work, but as a member of the Archaeology Committee. He's a very, very valued member of our committee, plays a big part in our attempts to single out the issues and problems of archaeology in the whole of the Greater London area. And Martin's going to be speaking now about Elsyng, basically, I think it was Sir Thomas Lovell's house originally, a great figure in the world of Henry VII. But of course, Henry VII had a son called Henry VIII, and anyone who had a decent property once Henry VIII was on the throne was likely to be in trouble. And of course, we associate Elsyng, I mean, in its early imperial days, as it were, as a home of Henry and of his children too. So it's a great pleasure then to have you speaking here today, and all the best. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Harvey. Here we are. We're in the borough of Enfield, right at the sort of north end of London. Now, of course, an urban area, but really quite rural and favoured for significant houses which are in striking distance of the capital, but still well away from it, well away from the diseases of the city. And we're in what's today the estate of Forty Hall, built by a Lord Mayor of London, Sir Nicholas Rainton, on a hill above the palace site. Today, Forty Hall is a heritage attraction and a public park. In particular, it's notable for a double line or avenue of lime trees, which you'll see coming up on plans as green dots, which run conveniently slap bang across the site of the palace. Quick historical summary. We've got artifactual evidence for activity from the 11th or 12th century, for something probably like a manor of some status. We've got quite a lot of pen floor tile, so sometime in the 14th century. But the future palace appears to probably have started as two brick-built ranges around two courtyards, probably around the 1430s, and appears to have been established by either John Tiptoft, Lord John Tiptoft, or his eponymous son, John Tiptoft, Earl of Worcester, major figures in the Wars of the Roses. The sort of biggest pointer to the fact that they were responsible for the first really significant house is the memorial to Joyce Lady Tiptoft, wife of Lord John, mother of the Earl of Worcester, which is in St Andrew's Church in Enfield town. But remains that can definitely be associated with this early phase archaeologically are fairly limited. We suspect that an awful lot of rebuilding has gone on. And an awful lot of that will have been down to this man, who Harvey's already mentioned. So documentary evidence really starts to become plentiful once it comes into the hands of Sir Thomas Lovell here, around about 1485. Lovell came from a very minor gentry family in Norfolk. He became a lawyer, and then he had an absolutely meteoric rise to become Chancellor of the Exchequer, Treasurer of the King's Chamber, eventually Constable of the Tower of London, and about 10 or 12 other senior offices of state. Exactly why he was promoted by Henry VII isn't quite clear, but almost immediately after Henry VII came to power, we find him being given significant lands and being entrusted with many areas of government. Relevant to Elsyng is the fact that just about this time he took a new wife, whose brother, curiously enough, had absolutely vast lands, of which Elsyng was just a tiny part, and then Lovell, who was also Speaker of the House of Commons, curiously enough, while his brother-in-law was abroad, introduced a bill to say that his brother-in-law was insane and therefore he should have guardianship of all his lands. We never hear of the brother again. So Sir Thomas Lovell gets hold of Elsyng. It becomes his main sort of home outside London, although he has another one as well. And under Henry VII and Henry VIII, he's a very powerful man. Both of those kings, because Lovell continued to serve Henry VIII as well, were frequent visitors to Elsyng, and they didn't stop visiting once Lovell died. Lovell died in 1524 because his heir, the Earl of Rutland, was one of Henry VIII's inner circle as a young man. And Elsyng then becomes a royal palace. Henry had visited it many, many times, clearly enjoyed it, largely because of its proximity to Enfield Chase, one of the big hunting forests. We all know about Henry VIII and hunting, or indeed all kings and hunting. So in 1539, he exchanged Elsyng for a couple of monasteries that he had lying around, in the north of England. And Henry used it essentially as a hunting base, but also as an occasional residence for the royal children. On his death, it was willed to Princess Elizabeth, who used it occasionally before becoming queen. It became one of the stops on royal progresses for a time, but it gradually fell out of favour, and it was used to accommodate royal favourites for a time. And then on the eve of the Civil War, one of them, the Earl of Pembroke, bought it, and by about 1657, his son had sold it to Nicholas Rainton, not the Lord Mayor of London who'd bought Forty Hall, or built Forty Hall, because of course he was dead by now. This is an eponymous nephew. And Nicholas Rainton essentially had Elsyng demolished. We think it was the land he wanted that it stood on, not the palace. Quick synopsis of previous archaeological work. The Enfield Archaeological Society refound the palace in the 1960s, showing just how much of it survived shallowly buried, doing so, of course, with immaculate health and safety protocols in place. So an awful lot of the palace survived. So fortunately did all the 1960s excavators, one of whom's here today as it happens. But the palace having been scheduled, 1967, the main North London gas orbital pipeline was driven through it. It wasn't deliberately driven through it. They didn't realise how big the palace was. But it did mean that there had to be a huge rush in order to try and record what was shown. You can see there the gas main recorded in 1967. Nothing more archaeologically happened until 2004, when the Society restarted excavations. And we've been concentrating for the first 16 to 20 years of the work on tracing the circuit of the outer court and then fully excavating one range down here at the bottom of the palace. Unfortunately, geophysics is of little use on this site. What it picks up is outcrops of gravel and the huge amount of demolition material that's been spread across the site. But LiDAR and grass mark evidence have helped, and we fully traced the outer court by 2019, and 16 years of excavations were then published in 2022, along with all the historical evidence for the site. Highlights of this work have included a large and very complete sunken furnace, almost certainly with a timber superstructure that lowered joints into a lead or copper vat, and we're reasonably happy that this identifies the palace boiling house for boiling large joints of meat before roasting and making sauces. Although it's not in the main kitchen range, it's in this southwest range in the outer court that Lovell, we think, built in roughly 1485, 1486, something like that. That range also contains a large amount of storage facilities, so barns, granaries, and other storage facilities around a courtyard. Having achieved that, what we've been focusing on since is the evidence for the interface between the inner court and the outer court. So the outer court on the right here is what we've essentially traced up to about 2019. The inner court on the left is where the 1960s excavations were, but obviously they've not been of such a scale, and we don't know exactly how they fit into the plan nearly as well. But what we've been focusing on is the interface between the two, because from the 1524 inventory on Lovell's death, we know there was a 4-storied inner gatehouse with a moat in front of it that marked the transition between the inner and outer courts. Topographical survey and LiDAR has helped, but it took a couple of years of archaeological excavations to locate the moat to start with, and then a couple more to move on and characterise the moat and identify the position of the gatehouse. You can see the 1960s, I don't think that's working, the 1960s work is up there sort of top left with the gas main features hurriedly recorded in one day in 1967 showing a bit more. The moat that we finally found was something of a surprise, up to 15 metres wide. We've traced it to a metre deep. I'm sure it's a lot deeper than that. And it clearly did very much divide the two courts. It also seems to have had a probably seasonally dry moat that extended it on. And then to the north, the moat narrows and runs round the end of the inner court, probably pretty much isolating it. We think there are moats on the other far side as well, but we're many years from getting it to them, I think. The moat fill that we came across was clearly dated around 1660. One or two just bits and pieces from it to give you an idea. We already had that demolition date from all the work we'd done on the outer court. It's quite clear from things like clay pipe evidence and so on. The end of the north range of the outer court almost certainly came right up to the moat, which here shallows considerably to meet it. We've got what looks like the platform, the abutment for a small footbridge running across the point where the wet moat and the dry moat meet. That's probably just a small bridge going south to the range that I was talking about with the boiling house and so on in. There must have been a bigger bridge to actually go from the outer to the inner court. We haven't found that one yet. But these moats, these moats essentially ring what's still very much a raised platform, though now a raised platform with very large trees on it. And that is giving us some pause for thought in doing the excavations. The raised platform has yielded 12th, 13th century pottery. We think that may be residual, so it may well have been raised when the first manor house was built in the 1430s. Over the last 2 seasons, though, parts of a large multi-phase structure have been excavated at the south end of the platform. It seems to begin as a large brick building, perhaps roughly rectangular, probably with a squared tower with a cellar below it. 3 rooms of it so far have been excavated. External gravel surfaces to the east and the west. The walls aren't huge. They suggest something perhaps of 2 stories. Within it, possibly standing in a second cellar, part of a large, probably octagonal pier, might imply some areas of it were more substantial, and we presume this is the inner gatehouse of the original earlier 15th century complex. In any event, the building showed modifications, including a new west wall to the cellar and a rebuild to the front of the suspected tower. Elements of the building were evidently truncated, but others retained when probably Sir Thomas Lovell in the 1480s did a large programme of rebuilding and probable extension. Cellars infilled. The new structures are built on large brick foundation rafts, and what we have so far got, we think, is the facade of this rebuild, and its scale suggests the sort of 4-storey construction known from the inventory. This part of the facade, the bit we've managed to look at so far, features multi-angular towers flanking a probable pedestrian entrance with brick columns framing the door, some evidence for slighter internal walls as well running back to the west. Further south, the facade's continued by what we think is a dwarf wall with column bases forming the front of a part-open loggia, but we need to do a bit more work here. This then is roughly what we think so far the part of the facade we revealed looked like. Going forward, we're handicapped by the presence of large trees in key positions and that damn gas main, whose trench was monitored when installed in 1967, and we probably don't want to disturb, really. But we hope this July to explore the loggia further. Finds, though, add a bit of detail to the appearance of the buildings and its internal fittings. Cut and rubbed brick, glazed tile is common, and we're beginning in the last couple of years to get some quite nice stonework. In particular, this is rather nice, which came up last year, a nice overmantel with some original graffiti on it that's then been plastered over. There's nothing new, always vandals aware, terrible. And just 1 or 2 other nice little finds that have come out in the last couple of years. So our annual excavations continue, hopefully every July, with a public open day. We've published a large amount of what I've talked about. You'll see our stall outside, and if anybody is interested in digging with us, we're always interested in having them. Thanks for asking me to speak today.
Well, thanks very much, Martin. I mean, clearly, the Enfield Archaeological Society has spent many, many years trying to disentangle the remains of that great house, and it's nice to hear about the progress. And as you said, Martin, there are books on sale in the other room, so if anyone wants to get more involved in Elsyng and discoveries, please have a look in there. I'm being told off? I am being told off. Thank you. Sorry about that.